She walked in with quiet confidence, just wanting to browse, but the manager saw only her skin, not her power. What followed? A lesson so harsh the entire store would never forget. Sometimes the one you judge signs your paycheck. It was a quiet weekday afternoon when she walked into the jewelry store, tall, calm, composed. Her outfit was simple: a soft beige blouse, dark jeans, and comfortable flats. Nothing about her screamed wealth, but everything about her spoke of quiet power. She held herself with the kind of grace that didn't beg for attention. It commanded. It silently. But the moment she crossed the threshold, the manager noticed her, watched her, judged her. From behind the glass counters, the manager narrowed her eyes, her smile tight and forced. She took one glance at the woman's skin tone and wardrobe, and something behind her eyes changed. She didn't move from her place, didn't greet her, didn't offer help. She simply stood, arms folded, watching. The black woman, unfazed, walked slowly past the velvet-lined displays. She admired a collection of delicate diamond necklaces, pausing at one in particular. The platinum chain sparkled under the overhead lights, its tiny stones catching the sun just right. She smiled gently to herself, then looked up. "Excuse me," she said with warmth in her voice. "Could I take a closer look at this one?" The manager stepped forward, but not with grace or service, more like reluctance. Her tone was stiff, her face rehearsed. "That piece is part of our premium collection," she said, her voice edged with dismissal. "It's quite expensive." The woman simply nodded, still smiling. "That's all right. I'd like to see it, please." There was a pause, a flicker of hesitation. The manager didn't unlock the case. Instead, she tilted her head slightly. "Are you sure that's the one you want to look at? We have a clearance section in the back. Lots of lovely options there. More affordable, too." The air shifted. The woman blinked once. Slowly. Not in surprise. She had heard this tone before, many times. She didn't respond with anger. She didn't make a scene. She just looked at the necklace again, then back at the manager. "I'm sure," she said softly. But still the key didn't come out. The case stayed locked. Just then, the door chimed. Two white women entered, laughing and chatting. One wore a tailored suit, the other carried a designer handbag. Their heels clicked confidently across the tiled floor. "Good afternoon, ladies." The manager beamed. Her voice brightened. She stepped out from behind the counter like a different person entirely. "Can I get you a glass of water? Champagne, maybe?" The woman who had asked to see the necklace watched the shift in energy, watched the way the manager moved quickly to assist them, taking one of the women by the arm and guiding her to a display. "This just came in from Italy," the manager gushed. "You two have excellent taste, I can already tell." The black woman stood a few feet away, completely ignored now, like she was invisible, like she had never spoken, like she didn't exist. She glanced around the store, at the pristine floors, the elegant lighting, the smiling faces that had nothing to do with her. A mirror near the far wall caught her reflection. She looked into her own eyes and saw the familiar sting, not of surprise, but of exhaustion. The kind that comes from experiencing the same thing, over and over again, in 1,000 different places. She stepped back from the display. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I'll be back. Another time." The manager didn't turn, didn't answer. She was too busy fastening a bracelet on the wrist of one of the white women, laughing at something she had just said. The black woman walked to the door, each step steady and silent. She opened it slowly, letting the breeze rush in before stepping outside. Behind her, the manager chuckled under her breath and muttered, just loud enough for the staff to hear, "Window shoppers. They always walk in like they can afford something." But what she didn't know, the woman wasn't done. Not even close. The city skyline stretched beyond the towering windows of the corporate headquarters. Sunlight spilled across the glossy, Marble floors and reflected off the glass walls of the luxury boardroom where silence hung thick with tension. Leather chairs lined the long oak table, and executives in tailored suits tapped pens, adjusted ties, and reviewed quarterly reports, their voices low and clipped with concern. Then the door opened. She stepped in. No longer in denim and flats, she wore a sharp navy blue suit that fit like it had been made just for her. Her hair was swept back in a neat bun, and the only jewelry she wore was a single platinum bracelet. Elegant, understated, powerful. She didn't need introductions. The room stood still for a beat. Then chairs shifted and heads turned as one. Of the executives stood to greet her. "Welcome," he said, gesturing toward the seat at the head of the table. "We've been looking forward to working with you." She nodded with quiet assurance, walking the length of the table with a stride. That said everything. They didn't know where she came from. They didn't know her story. They just knew she had recently acquired a significant share in the company, and with it the title of regional owner. She now had authority over every store in the region, including the one she had walked out of not long ago, humiliated but composed. As she sat, they began their meeting. The discussion revolved around performance reviews, profit margins, expansion possibilities, and problem stores. "There's one location in particular that's been dragging numbers," one executive said, flipping open a folder. "Service. Complaints, low retention, underwhelming sales, customers report feeling unwelcome. Staff turnover is high." She kept her expression neutral, but she knew exactly which location they meant. She remembered the sterile smell, the manager's smug voice, the cold refusal, the way her presence had been treated like a threat. The insult wasn't just in what was said, but what was implied. That someone like her couldn't possibly belong in a place like that. Couldn't afford? Couldn't matter, the executive continued, unaware. "We're reviewing whether it's worth a full remodel or new leadership altogether." She waited for the room to settle, then cleared her throat softly. "I'd like to visit the store again," she said, unannounced. A few brows raised. "Personally?" "Yes, I want to observe things myself, get a feel for the culture from the ground," another executive chimed in, intrigued. "I think that's a great idea. It could show initiative and bring insight from an owner's perspective." She nodded. But inside, she wasn't thinking about insight. She was thinking about memory-free, the meeting. She walked the polished halls of the building, her heels clicking with quiet rhythm. Her mind drifted, not to the conversation that just ended, but to everything it had taken to reach that room in the first place. She remembered being 16, working the register at a discount store while classmates spent weekends at malls and parties. She remembered studying by flashlight in her mother's tiny apartment when the power was shut off. She remembered being passed over for promotions, ignored in rooms where her ideas were repeated louder by someone else and suddenly respected. She remembered her first investment, small, scrappy, terrifying, a tiny booth at a flea market where she sold handmade jewelry while balancing 2 jobs and night classes. She remembered the loans she was denied, the business plans that were dismissed, the clients who spoke to her assistant instead of her because they couldn't believe she was the boss. But she never broke. She just got sharper, smarter, quieter. She learned to read a room before stepping into it, learned to wait, watch, then strike with precision. Every no she ever received became fuel. Every closed door became proof of what she would build on, her own. She started with online retail. Then came partnerships. Then came real estate. And now, this, the acquisition that had brought her full circle, into the very industry that once tried to shut her out. Not for the money. For the message. Her fingers brushed the edge of the sleek marble wall as she passed. She didn't smile, but there was something steel-like in her gaze now. They had dismissed her once. They wouldn't do it again. That night, she sat alone in her apartment, the space quiet, peaceful. She held a small velvet box in her hands. Inside was the necklace she had asked to see that day. She hadn't bought it from that store. She'd sourced it directly from the supplier. She had options they couldn't imagine. She didn't wear it. She just stared at it for a moment, then closed the lid and placed it aside. She didn't need the jewelry to feel powerful. She was power now. Tomorrow she was going back, but not as a customer, as their boss. It was just after noon when the store began to fill. The hum of soft jazz played overhead, blending with the clinks of display cases opening and closing, the soft voices of customers admiring pieces they could barely afford, and the rehearsed charm of staff members eager to impress. The manager stood near the front, posture proud, her smile sharpened into a blade of superiority. She leaned slightly toward a junior associate, her voice lowered, but not enough to avoid being overheard. "I keep this place classy," she said, with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "You have to filter out the wrong crowd, you know? One wrong kind of customer and suddenly the vibe changes. I can spot them a mile away." The associate gave a tight, uncomfortable smile, nodding, without commitment. The manager didn't notice. She was too caught up in her own certainty. Then the door chimed. The woman entered, but not like last time. This time she looked even more unassuming. Loose cardigan, plain jeans, sneakers with the slightest scuff, her hair pulled back into a messy bun. No makeup, no bag from a designer, label, no outward signs of influence or wealth. She walked with a calm, steady rhythm, her eyes scanning the displays. Her face gave nothing away, just quiet observation. The manager saw her, and the smirk that formed was almost instinctive. There was a pause, a beat of recognition, but not the right kind. Not the kind that should have triggered caution. The manager didn't remember her clearly. Just another type. That same assumption wrapped around her brain like a reflex. The woman stepped toward the far display, one that held a series of high-end bracelets shimmering with diamonds and set in white gold. She leaned forward slightly, her gaze falling on a piece with a minimalist design but obvious value. "Excuse me," she said politely without raising her voice. "Could I take a look at that bracelet?" The manager didn't move. She gave a short, clipped smile, one that didn't warm her face. "That one?" she asked, her voice edged with disbelief. The woman nodded once. The manager hesitated, just long enough for it to sting. Then she stepped forward slowly, not unlocking the case but standing between the woman and the bracelet. "Those pieces," she said carefully, "aren't really for browsing. They're high-end, exclusive." "I understand," the woman replied calmly. "I'd still like to see it." The manager crossed her arms. "Well," she said, almost like a friend offering a secret, "you might want to check online. We have some great options there, more accessible. Lots of discount options. You'd be surprised." The pause that followed was heavy, thick. The woman didn't react, not with shock, not with anger. Her gaze remained locked with the manager's, steady and unreadable. Then she tilted her head, just slightly. "Is that how you treat all your customers?" The manager's face shifted. Defensive now, cautious. "We have a standard here," she said quickly. "We cater to a certain clientele. You can't just let anyone handle merchandise like that. It's policy." And then, without warning, the woman reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folder. Slim, black, professional. She opened it slowly, deliberately, and slid a document out. Crisp, official, undeniable. She handed it to the manager. The manager took it, confused, her eyes scanning the header. Franchise ownership agreement. Regional authority. Effective immediately. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Silence filled the store like a wave crashing into a void. The staff froze. One assistant dropped a box of velvet trays, the soft thud echoing like thunder. A customer near the back whispered something under her breath. All eyes shifted. Even the jazz music seemed to disappear. The woman straightened her posture. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "You work for me." The words were delivered not with rage, but with absolute certainty. The manager's face drained of color. Her lips trembled. She looked from the document to the woman's face, searching for any sign this was some sort of mistake. But there was none. I didn't realize," she stammered, her throat dry. "I didn't know." "No," the woman interrupted gently. "You didn't ask, you assumed. Twice." The staff exchanged glances, nervous and unsure. No one stepped in. No one defended the manager. They had all seen it, heard it, felt it. The woman looked down at the folder in the manager's shaking hands, then took it back, sliding it inside with the same care she used to present it. She looked around the store, slowly taking in the faces, the shocked customers, the pale staff, the manager who now stood as small as she had once tried to make her feel. "Let's talk about standards," the woman said, her tone crisp as she walked past the counter and into the employee area, leaving silence in her wake. Behind her, the door to the back office swung shut. The office in the back of the store was small but pristine, with crisp, white walls, framed company values on display, and a long table surrounded by chairs meant more for form than comfort. The staff filtered in one by one, the air heavy with unease. No one spoke as they sat. No phones were checked. No one dared ask what was happening. But they knew. They had seen enough, heard enough. And now, the silence said everything. She stood at the head of the room, not with a clipboard or raised voice, but with presence. She didn't pace. She didn't need to. Her stillness was more commanding than motion. When everyone was seated, she began. "I came into this store twice," she said, "once as a customer, once as your superior. Neither time was I treated with respect." Her voice was calm, measured like a metronome. But there was weight behind every word. A steady fire wrapped in steel. I wasn't loud. I wasn't rude. I didn't demand special treatment. I walked in quietly and asked to see a piece of jewelry. That was all. But the moment I was seen, I was categorized, dismissed, insulted. The room was silent, the staff staring down at their hands or the floor. No one dared interrupt. I was told something wasn't for me. I was advised to look at discount sites. I was told I didn't fit the standard. That, somehow, my presence, disrupted the class of this place. She let that hang in the air for a moment, giving everyone time to feel the discomfort, not to punish, but to make it real. "This business," she continued, "is built on elegance, yes, on quality, yes, but it is not built on exclusion. We don't sell diamonds to skin tones. We don't match bracelets to bank accounts. We don't greet people based on how expensive they look." Still, she didn't raise her voice, but the firmness in her tone made the walls feel tighter. Luxury is about dignity, about experience, about how we make someone feel when they step through that door. Not just the ones in designer heels, not just the ones with platinum cards, everyone. One of the assistants, a young man who had quietly watched the manager's behavior for months, cleared his throat. It was soft, hesitant. She's done that before," he said. "Told me not to waste time on certain customers. Said they probably couldn't afford anything anyway." Another employee nodded slowly. A woman this time. "She said I was too friendly with certain shoppers, that it made the store feel less exclusive." The manager, who sat at the far end of the table, stiffened. She looked like she wanted to speak but held herself back, waiting. The woman turned to her now, locking eyes. "You've led this store," she said, "with bias disguised as standards, with arrogance wrapped in policy. And the worst part? You thought no one would notice." The manager's lips parted. "I didn't mean, She held up a hand, gently but firmly cutting her off. Intent doesn't erase impact. You made a snap judgment based on how I looked. You decided who I was before I ever spoke. You talked down to me, laughed when I left. There was no cruelty in her voice, no revenge, just truth, raw and exposed. "Do you believe," she asked, "that you still represent this brand?" The manager blinked, clearly shaken. I'm sorry, I really am." But the words were empty. The kind said when backed into a corner, the kind that tastes like survival, not sincerity. The woman studied her for a moment longer. Then she nodded, slowly, knowingly. "An apology without growth," she said, "is manipulation." The room went still. She turned to the others. "I don't need perfection. I don't need anyone to pretend to know everything about other people's experiences. But I do need integrity. I need humility. And I need to know that when someone walks into this store, they'll be seen, not judged." She turned back to the manager, her voice quiet again, but still unshakable. "Effective immediately, you're suspended pending formal review. HR will contact you with next steps." The manager's eyes widened. Her mouth opened again as if to argue, but then shut. She saw it now. The woman wasn't just a figurehead. She was the storm that arrived in silence. And now she was the one defining the standard. The woman looked once more around the room. "This store will change," she said, "not just because I walked in, but because you now understand what happens when the wrong voices lead the room." She gathered her folder from the table, straightened it, and turned toward the door. "You don't get to gatekeep luxury. Not anymore." And with that, she left the silence behind her, rattled, reshaped, and ready. Weeks passed, but the memory of that day never left the store. It lingered in the air, in the corners, in the quiet glances exchanged between employees whenever a customer walked in. But something else began to fill that space too. Change. Not the surface kind, with new signs or rearranged displays, but something deeper. The store no longer clung to exclusivity like armor. It breathed easier now. The silence that once held judgment now held welcome. The physical space had shifted slightly. Warmer lighting, more open design, a touch of color in the once too sterile layout, but the real transformation was in the people. The staff looked different, not just more diverse in race, but in energy. Kind eyes, patient tones, genuine smiles that reached their cheeks. It wasn't about appearance anymore. It was about presence. There was a softness in the room now, not from a lack of discipline, but from the kind of confidence that doesn't need to belittle others. And then there she was. The woman entered the store as she often did now, not to inspect or supervise, but to be part of it. The way the team greeted her said it all. It wasn't out of fear or protocol. It was respect. Real, earned respect. Heads lifted when she walked in, voices lightened. She was no longer a stranger mistaken for someone beneath the store's standard. Now she was the standard. She moved through the aisles slowly, taking in the quiet hum of service, the soft shine of glass, the peaceful rhythm of a place that had once been so cold to her. The staff kept working, but one by one they smiled as she passed, offering soft nods or warm hellos. Behind the counter stood someone new, a manager, not of color, but of character. A woman whose posture wasn't rigid with power, but relaxed, with self-awareness. She greeted each customer with the same calm, whether they wore designer coats or dollar store jeans. She didn't look past people. She looked at them, and that made all the difference. The woman had chosen her personally, not to check a diversity box, but because she listened, because she learned, because she didn't speak the language of status. She spoke the language of care. In flashes, her story played behind her eyes as she walked. She'd once folded shirts in the back of a budget clothing store, staying late to vacuum floors when no one noticed. She'd sold phone plans at kiosks in malls, smiled through microaggressions, endured the dismissive tones of customers who thought black meant less. She'd gone home exhausted, counted coins, read investment blogs by night, taught herself real estate through second-hand books. She bought her first rundown duplex before she was 30, flipped it, then another. She saved, invested, learned the language of capital, outpaced men twice her age. She failed sometimes, more than once. But each setback was another weight added to her foundation. Over time, she didn't just build a business. She built a name. Quietly, strategically. Her empire was not built on noise or attention but on precision. When she bought into the jewelry franchise, she didn't brag. She didn't post. She just walked in like anyone else because that's what power looks like when it knows itself. The door chimed softly. A girl stepped in. Young, maybe 17. Skin the color of honey. Eyes wide, shoulders tense. Her shoes were worn, her backpack frayed at the edges. She paused just inside, almost like she wasn't sure she belonged. The woman noticed her immediately. She watched the way the girl took it all in, each display case, each glittering stone, each polished surface. She could see the doubt in her eyes, the hesitation in her step. And in that moment, she saw herself. She walked over, slowly, calmly. No manager, no owner, just a woman. She stood beside her, not in front. "First time in a place like this?" she asked gently. The girl nodded, not quite meeting her eyes. "It's pretty," she said softly. "I just wanted to see it up close. I don't want to touch anything." The woman smiled. She turned to the nearest case, lifted the latch, and carefully pulled out a delicate silver ring with a single small sapphire in the center. "Try this." "One," she said, offering it to the girl like a secret. The girl's eyes widened. I can't. I don't have money." The woman shook her head. "I didn't ask for money. I asked you to try it on." The girl hesitated, then slowly extended her hand. The ring slid on perfectly. She stared at it, almost afraid to breathe. "It looks good on you," the woman said, lowering her voice into a whisper. "You belong here." The words were soft, but they echoed louder than any insult ever had. The girl didn't respond, not right away. Her throat tightened. Her lips parted, then closed. Her fingers trembled slightly as she admired the way the gem caught the light. Behind them, the staff watched with small smiles, no longer surprised. They'd seen this before. Not the ring, the magic, the restoration. The woman guided the girl through a few more displays, explaining how different gems represented different meanings. Protection, clarity, hope. She let her try on a bracelet, then a pendant. Not selling, just sharing. The girl, left with a small brochure tucked into her pocket and a quiet promise. "Come back anytime. You don't need a reason." The woman returned to her usual quiet seat in the store's corner, the one near the window, where the sunlight streamed in just enough to make the floors shine. And as the day moved on, the store buzzed like a hive. People, walking in and out, smiles exchanged, laughter here and there. It had become more than a luxury boutique. It was a place of restoration, a place where dignity wasn't bought. It was protected. No one would ever know how many battles the woman had fought to reach this point, how many times she'd been laughed at, passed over, dismissed. But none of that mattered now, because they had judged her on her clothes, her skin, her silence. But she was never just a customer. She was a storm in disguise, and today she owned the sky. Never underestimate quiet power. For more stories like this, subscribe to Simply Stories.